To his friend Pompeius Saturninus, about barely enough the arrival of a young letter, in which you demanded that I send you one of my compositions, coincided with my own decision to do so. Thus you have spurred on this horse already eager, simultaneously depriving yourself of any excuse to avoid the toil of reading it, and be of the embarrassment of demanding that you do, for it is hardly right for me to show reluctance towards your offer, or for you to be oppressed by your own request. But you are not to anticipate any new work for this idle fellow, for I intend to ask you to read again at leisure the speech which I delivered before my fellow townsmen prior to dedicating their library. I recall that you have already made some general observations on it, so now I am begging you not merely to peruse it in the round, but also to examine the detail with your usual critic faculty. I shall then also, after correction, have the opinion of publishing or of withholding it. Indeed, this process of correction will perhaps guide my hesitant steps on whether to publish it or not. Quite frequent reconsideration will either establish in its unworthiness for publication or will make it worthy in the course of scrutiny. Yet the reason for this hesitation of mine lie not so much in the writing as in the nature of the subject matter, for it is rather too boastful and elevated. It is weighed heavily on my modesty to the style itself is restrained and subdued because I am compelled to dwell upon the generosity of my parents of my parents and myself. The topic is too edge and ticklish, even though the need justifies it. For if praise, even from other people, often sounds unwelcome to people's ears, how hard it is to ensure that the speech dwelling on oneself and one's skin does not sound oppressive. For we tend to lose true worth and still more the fame and repute which attend it. It is only when such honorable deeds lie buried in obscurity and silence that we subject them to less disparagement and criticism. For this reason, I have often asked myself whether I should have composed this such speech, for such as it is for others as well as myself. That this was written for my own benefit, that I was reminded by the fact that many things which are essential in the performance of an action lose both their usefulness and their esteem once they are concluded. To look no further for instances of this, what was more useful than to commit to paper of the reason for my generosity? This was the means by which I succeeded, for my first of all in dwelling on honorable reflections, secondly in visualizing the nobility in more thought, more extended thought, and finally in guarding against the regret which accompanies impulsive generosity. These considerations gave birth to what we call the practice of despising money, for though nature has constrained all of us to keep it under lock and key, and my fondness for munificence, on which I have reflected long and hard, has freed me for the chains of greed by which the generality of people is bound, and my generosity seemed more likely to win praise because I was drawn to it not by a sort of impulse but by a considered plan. In addition to these motives, there was the fact that I was pledging money for not sales on gladiators but for year expenses towards the rearing of children. Moreover, pleasures which delight to the eye and the ear, so far for demanding approval, ought not to be encouraged but rather played down in public addresses. Indeed, to induce a person gladly to undertake the wearing toil of bringing up children, we must successfully deploy not merely rewards but also refined exhortations. If physicians use more wheedling words in prescribing a healthy but not prescribable diet, how much more fitting was it was it in the public interest to recommend by the general words a service which is highly useful but not equally popular. This was particularly important since I had to endeavor to explain that what was being conferred on parents should be approved by the childless also, so that the privilege granted to the few would be patiently awaited and deserved by the rest. But just as at the time I was intent on the general welfare rather than on my own self-projection, when I wanted the purpose and outcome of my gift to be understood. So now, in considering publication, I feel that I may perhaps appear to have ministered to my own praise rather than to advantages of others. However, I keep in mind the fact that the greater magnanimity attributes the rewards of worthy behavior to our moral awareness rather than to our good reputation. Esteem ought to be the outcome rather than the motive, and if by some chance it does not occur, it is no less noble in having deserved that esteem. Indeed, people who dignify the good deeds by counting them are taught not to announce them because they have performed them, but to have performed them, but have to perform them in order to announce them. In this way, what would have been a fine action when recounted by another fades from few when the one who performed it himself recounts it. For when people cannot nullify the deed, they attack the boasting which accompanies it. Thus, if you have done something which should go unmentioned, the action itself incurs blame. But if you do not keep quiet about something praiseworthy, you yourself get the blame. In my case, a personal obstacle presents itself, for I delivered this very speech not before the citizens, but before the city council in the Senate House and not in the open. My fear is therefore that having avoided a popular approval and applause when delivering the speech, it is rather inappropriate to seek it now by publishing it. So having to distance myself from the very people whose interests were being consulted by interposing the door and the walls of the Senate House, so as not to give the impression of canvassing them, I fear that by now publicizing myself before them, I may be seeking out the very persons to whom my generosity is irrelevant apart from the example it sets before them. You have heard the reasons for my hesitation, but I shall differ to you at least, for the authority at which will afford me a sufficient reason to proceed. Farewell.